Welcome to the Solo Mo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss the intersection of social, local, and mobile. Our goal is to help you understand these topics so you can integrate them into your marketing and advertising. Today is March 16th, 2012, and this is episode number 10. How's it going, Adam?
It's going all right, man. We hit the double digits.
Double digits, celebration.
We'll do a virtual high five through the internet.
Virtual high five, I like it.
And my cat over here has discovered my headphones dangling down, so I'm just waiting for you to hear this big and my whole computer go falling over.
There you go.
Things going all right on your end?
It's going great. You know what today is, right?
Today is Friday, right?
Friday, better known as iPad 3 Day. Woo!
Well, actually, no. We can't call it iPad 3. It's going to be like, the new iPad day.
I'm sorry. The new iPad Day, which sounds like there was an old iPad Day, and now we've got a new iPad Day.
I know, and next year will actually be called the newer iPad Day.
Ah, okay. You had a call with the execs up at Apple and asked them about it, and they said, yeah, next year, newer iPad, that's what we're calling it.
For whatever reason, now the way that they're selling it, it actually should be called the newer iPad because they still have an older model.
Right.
So when somebody comes to the store and wants to choose which iPad model, and somebody says, well, which model do you want? You say, I want the newer iPad.
There you go.
Right?
I think so. I think that makes sense. Let's reprint the boxes and get it out there.
I think I should be hired by Apple for their marketing department.
There you go.
So I guess that means you got yours in hand today. And in fact, I know you did because on Twitter, you kind of rubbed it in on me saying, did yours show up yet?
Mine showed up early, actually. So I had it delivered to work. And I think because of that, we get early FedEx deliveries. So the FedEx guy showed up basically at 9 o'clock with iPad in hand. And I wasn't expecting it until probably, early afternoon, mid rounds or whatever, but shows up at 9 o'clock and I'm like, well, I guess there goes productivity this morning. So open it up, checked it out. The thing that I messed up on though is I didn't bring my iPad, so I had the iPad 2. I didn't bring that with me to compare them side by side. So I opened this thing up and I'm like, oh, it looks awesome, but I didn't have anything to compare it to be like, well, it's more awesome than this iPad 2.
Well, people are going to laugh at us and say, well, if it's going to be cool, it should be cool on its own. It doesn't have to be cool by comparison. So
right.
How cool is that to be enjoying a device only because you were able to compare it to how good or bad it is to the to the other models around it or something like that?
It wasn't that I wasn't enjoying it. It was that I had it and I was like, well, this looks really crisp, but I didn't remember what the old one looked like. Like instantly my brain clicked over and was like, oh, this is what all iPad screens look like. And so I couldn't actually remember what the old screen looked like. So when I got it home and put it side by side, I was like, holy crap, it is way different. Like seeing them side by side, it's impressive and drastically different. But when I first opened it up, I was like, well, this kind of just looks like the old one, right? Like, it was weird how quickly your brain transitions into, well, this is just what iPad screens look like.
Well, and the same thing happened with the iPhone when it had the new screen. You kind of looked at the one before it and was like, I remember that I like this phone,
right?
But why do I like it still? This is old. Doesn't look as crisp. So I honestly, like right now, I always, when we do our recordings, I have the the notes, the show notes, and so on in hand on my iPad, and I got it. I got the iPad while I was at home and I was working on some stuff, and I was bouncing back and forth trying to make sure that I had my old one backed up. And then eventually when I got the new one, you got to transfer everything over and all that, which takes, I don't know about you. Do you have it syncing via iCloud over the air?
So I do, but when I went to, you can set it up, and I set it up as a iCloud backup, and it errored for some reason, and it wouldn't do a restore. So I just started fresh and added the apps that I pretty much use every day, and I was like, it's a good chance to start fresh and make sure that what's on it is what I want on it, and I leave off some of the apps that maybe I downloaded just to try out and I have been using a lot lately.
What about all your preferences and all of the things like your email and all that stuff that you would set up on it?
a little bit annoying that it didn't bring that over, but I've set up so many devices now that getting all that up and running isn't that big of a hassle for me. I kind of like going through and reminding myself each setting and kind of customizing it, making sure my preference hasn't changed over time. And, oh, maybe I do want it to remind me when it does that, or maybe I want to turn this notification off or this notification on. So it's a good chance to just re-audit the entire experience.
Yeah, because it takes like 2 hours at least. Depends on how much data you have, because there's two parts of the process. One is restoring it from your old backup, and then the second one is actually syncing back all of the stuff you have on it. So that includes, any photos, that includes music, it includes all the apps. For my iPhone, I have a lot of apps, but I'm surprised when you look at kind of the ratio. I don't know about you. You probably are very similar, actually, that, iTunes shows you the percentage, so to speak, of how much you have of music, photos, apps, and any sort of miscellaneous stuff. And for my iPhone, it's like almost 50% of my phone has photos. On the iPad, it's like not 50%, but a majority of the data that I'm using is apps.
Right.
Because they're so huge. You get something like a game like
Infinity Blade.
And it's like a gig.
Right.
Which I think is a bit ridiculous. I've had to kind of change my method of what I choose and don't choose to put on the device and how I'm going to manage it, because I was running out of space just because of that, and almost wish that I had gotten a 64 gigabyte iPad, and I just don't want to spend that money right now on that. But at any rate, it takes time. And it takes a lot of time to get it all set up, but it's cool.
I was going to say, I did get a chance to use the iCloud backup for photos at least, because, I had opened this thing and I was playing around with it, and I'm like, well, what's really going to, give me an impression for the screen? And I was like, well, all the photos that I took recently. So I turned on iCloud backup and it just started importing all
the photo stream, right?
Yeah, the photo stream photos. So I was scrolling through some of those. So I did get to watch it, pop each one of the photos in as it was doing the iCloud backup. Wasn't that bad in terms of speed. I think our work connection is pretty strong. But it was
a Wi-Fi one.
Yeah. Oh no. I ordered the Verizon 4G one, but at the office, at least where I was standing when I was doing all this, it didn't click over into LTE. It was just at Verizon 3G, so I connected to via Wi-Fi.
Okay. Well, maybe sometime what we should do is a sort of kind of solo show on iOS stuff, and kind of more specifically maybe some apps that help people manage and manage their social media and create content and curate and communicate and do business and sell better and so on using iOS devices, maybe.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like we've talked enough about Apple at this point that we could probably include a whole episode about it and run through some of our favorite apps and workflow and tips and tricks and all that.
Yeah, cool. Well, that sounds good. I don't want to think we've taken enough time the last two shows talking about the iPad, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about what we enjoy, because right after I finish talking with you here, I'm probably going to go run over there and open the photos. I forgot. Now you made me think about checking out the old photos and how those will look on the new device.
I'll give you a little preview. They look amazing.
Well, cool.
Pretty impressive.
So what do you want to start with today?
I guess we could start with the reason we're recording on a Friday, which is that I spent most of this week in Austin for South by Southwest. Actually got back into town basically very late Wednesday, early Thursday. And so, we didn't get a chance to do the recording on Tuesday, and Wednesday was tired, and Thursday we were, I think, both busy. So here we are Friday, and we're finally getting a chance to record.
Is that your first time there?
It's my second time, actually. I didn't go last year, but I went the year before. So I skipped a year, but decided to make a return this year and go and check it all out and live the South by experience.
Yeah, I want to go sometime, but I kind of always get to live vicariously through everybody else through, Twitter and Facebook, and this year actually there was quite a lot, and still is, for the folks that are still over there for the music portion.
Yeah,
there's a lot of action going on with Instagram.
Right, definitely.
And were you using Instagram a lot while you were out there?
I was, and one of the trends that I noticed is I wasn't alone. Instagram felt like it was everywhere. You'd see people in panels checking their Instagram feeds, and you'd see them out taking pictures and then submitting it to Instagram. And everybody that I was following that's kind of in the tech scene and was at South by was just posting pictures throughout the event. So at this point, especially for that tech and social media crowd, I think we can safely assume that Instagram is pretty well established as just the go-to photo sharing app for, well, at this point, anybody with an iPhone. But they actually announced at South by Southwest that they're quickly working and soon to launch their Android app as well, with the goal of reaching 100 million users, I think by the end of the year. Right now they're at 27 million, and they've got, huge aspirations. They want to be at 100 million by the end of the year. So I think for marketers, especially Instagram, if you're not already thinking about it, it's time to start, because it's what Twitter was early on, where you could just see that it was going to grow and more people were going to use it. And so, it's no longer, well, if I spend time on this, are people going to see it? Am I just spending time on this network that's going away? I think it's safe to assume that Instagram is here to stay, and it is something that people love. They love experiencing it. And, if you can add your brand in there in a helpful and positive way, you'll get some good return on that.
Well, and it's not only about saying brands should get on it or marketers should think about it because it's popular, or it's trendy. It's a place where there's going to be eyeballs, right?
Yeah.
The interesting, and I forgot to bring it in on the notes, and you just kind of reminded me as you were saying, people were sitting there and they're just always constantly checking their feed, and we'll kind of touch on this with some other stuff that you kind of brought back in regards to trends that were happening at South by Southwest. But there was a great post recently, and I didn't get a chance to read it yet. I put it off to the side so that I could read it, but I could see that they were essentially talking about how marketers need to have a visual strategy now.
Yeah.
A strategy that is now related to, photos and images and things that quickly people loved and are gravitating towards because of things like Instagram and Pinterest. And of course, the huge, I would say resurgence. It's not a resurgence by any means. It's really kind of this huge groundswell of infographics.
Yep.
So I'm really interested in hearing that coming from a designer's perspective and a design background in order to check out and see what angle they're getting at. But I mean, that really sounds like kind of what you noticed while you were at South by Southwest.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we've been talking about Pinterest off and on for this show basically since the beginning. And, Pinterest is a very visual social network. It's people expressing themselves through photos, and whether photos that they took or photos they're finding on the internet. Now you've got Instagram, that's these photos that people are taking, and it's both, hey, here's food that I'm eating, products that I like, or just, things that I'm looking at. It's a very visual medium. And it was something that was specific to South by Southwest, but even ties into that, was the idea of these visual notes. And they were, prominent throughout the event, which is, the idea is, when you're going to a panel, instead of just writing down things you hear, actually kind of drawing out the panel and the things that you're noticing and your own notes and your thoughts, and doing so, almost creating a infographic on the fly. So there were two groups that I saw doing it. There was Ogilvy, which sponsored the official notes for the conference. And these were actually giant boards that were up in front of a lot of the bigger rooms or the main discussions. And they had really talented artists that would draw out these notes, and then they shared it on the South by Southwest site, so you could go and check these out. And then the other one that I saw was Unified Social. They were going to other panels, and I sat next to the guy who was doing it, and he was drawing on an iPad using a stylus. So it was really cool to watch him zoom in, write a couple things, draw something, zoom back out to look at the whole picture. But they were sharing these visual notes as well. And again, the end result is a combination of text and arrows to connect ideas and images, and it's just a very visual way of sharing information. And then specific to the unified social, tying it back into Pinterest, which we just talked about, each one of the visual notes on their site has a Pinterest button. So you could add it to a Pinterest board. Maybe it's a marketing board or a social media board. So I thought that was kind of going full circle from visual notes back into Pinterest, which then gets shared within the Pinterest community.
Yeah, I think visual visual thinking and conveying information in a visual fashion. I mean, it's something that I've been a fan of, and of course, again, from a designer's perspective and background, has seen as a powerful element when it comes to telling a story on the web and conveying information and so on. But now there seems to be, I think, in the past it was primarily photography, really,
Right.
and people who did just kind of, graphic design, something like deviantart.com and so on, when folks were showing off what they were doing creatively in that sense. But now it's really like information and messages, and even just on Pinterest, I was hearing somebody recently say something like that there was a study that showed that Pinterest, I think it was from BlogHer, the BlogHer conference and the BlogHer organization, did some sort of study, and they said that a majority of folks felt that Pinterest was a more trustworthy source for them to kind of like find information and get find kind of like be influenced to purchase based on the photos that they see.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's some sort of there's something interesting that I don't know. I'd be interested to get a little bit more past just the headline and see exactly who they were asking and how many folks and all that. But it's this kind of this connection that it has in a different part of your brain than what it does when you're like actually sitting there and reading information or hearing somebody talk to you about it. And it seems to really be clicking for a lot of folks, and kind of again just erupting in a lot of different formats here. And I'm wondering if the new Flickr, for instance, will end up playing any part of this, as well as they're trying to kind of rearrange and redo a lot of the features that they're having, because they really missed out on potentially being a Pinterest-esque sort of site, although they are very different in the type of content that gets shared there, because Pinterest, of course, is from external sources, where Flickr is directly from, photographers and such.
Mm-hmm.
They could potentially have spun something off and created a different community or something.
Yeah.
But at any rate, it's very interesting to see that kind of finally becoming as popular as it is, and I don't think it'll be a trend. Or excuse me, a fad. I think that it will definitely find its niche and kind of its foothold in how people communicate. What do you think on that?
Yeah, and I think you can even look at something like the timeline for Facebook as a great example of just
Yep.
this trend towards more visual, less text, or at least accentuating anything you're writing in text with an image or with some sort of visual. You've got this timeline, and Facebook from the very beginning was a very tech-focused site. It was minimalistic, and people were sharing a lot of updates, but it wasn't a lot of sharing images. People shared their personal photos, but they didn't share like graphs from the web or whatever. But now you're looking at this timeline design, and they didn't go, hey, you've got a little bit. They went big with the image. You've got, I think it's like 800 by 300 pixels or something. You've got a lot of visual room to play with. And then every update in the timeline, you can include an image. And then if you want to, you can actually, feature that highlight or feature that item, which brings it across your entire timeline and makes it this huge visual statement. So, any marketer now, in addition to thinking about the types of content you want to share, should be thinking about the visual elements that are going to best represent that content and best catch people's eye and and make them want to share that as well.
Well, talking about the difference between curating external content and contributing your own, there was a post that was making rounds recently. Do you want to talk about the Curator's Code a little bit?
Sure. So Curator's Code was an interesting site because, well, I mean, first off, the design of it was pretty interesting. Whoever's behind it has a an eye towards creative design. They've got this, an actual, it looks like a little eyeball, and I think it's made with HTML5 because it's super responsive, but you move your mouse around and it follows it with this creepy looking eyeball thing. Anyways, that's just a kind of a side note, but what it is, it's a website that's trying to create a official or widely agreed upon way of referencing sources of information. So if you're a blog or a website and you're looking around the interweb, the internet, and you come across something and you're like, oh, this would be great, I want to share it with my audience. It's creating a way for you to acknowledge the source of that information. And throughout blogging and throughout the internet, people have done this through various methods. You see the via link a lot, both in blogs and oftentimes even on Twitter. But the challenge is it's not used by everyone in the same way. So oftentimes on Twitter, I'll actually use a slash and a V to indicate via. But, other people just use the word via. Other people use HT for hat tip. So there's a number of different ways people do it. And so it creates confusion. And what Curator's Code is trying to do is create two symbols, one that represents via, and via indicates a link of direct discovery. So this is a site that I found this information on. I didn't go anywhere else. I found it here, and now I'm writing about it or I'm sharing it. The other symbol represents a hat tip, and this indicates a link of indirect discovery, story lead, or inspiration. So let's say you're browsing around and you maybe go on an official channel. Let's say Apple releases a new product. And so you start looking around and find other blogs that have written opinions, and it starts to inspire your own opinion, or you want to bring together a bunch of different snippets from people's coverage of that. You can give a hat tip to each one of those where you're saying, hey, I'm acknowledging the fact that your site, inspired part of what I'm sharing here. It wasn't the whole thing, but I want to acknowledge that I did get some of my information from your site. And it's interesting because it's using these little symbols and trying to establish that, which is always a challenge on the internet. Anytime you're asking people to do something that's not an easy to type character, I think that is a lot to ask of people on a mass scale. So, I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't know that this specific one is going to take off. But, I think the general idea here and why I wanted to cover it on the show is that brands, it's become a common recommendation for brands to curate content and for people to say, hey, you should be out there finding good content and share that with your audience. Your audience will appreciate that, and that'll bring in additional people who will, they'll share it with their friends and say, hey, you should check out this site or this company's blog. They share a lot of great stuff. The problem is if you're not attributing the source of this information, it's kind of I don't know a good word for it. It's not, it's kind of lying, I guess. That's not the best word for it, but it's basically taking credit for something that you didn't deserve credit for. Somebody else went out, they scooped the story, or they worked directly with this company, they wrote up a lot of their own opinion. You're getting inspired by that, or you're taking information from that story and creating your own. So best practice is to acknowledge and say, hey, thanks to this site for providing me a story or inspiring me or giving me an additional insight. I think it's just something that marketers should keep in mind so that they don't get in trouble by repurposing content, not giving attribution, and then having a site that got that scoop and knows that they're the only source you could have got that from come to you and say, hey, what's up with not attributing me? I put a lot of work into that story and you didn't even acknowledge that fact and help your audience understand where you got that information from.
I mean, and in the end, whether there's a nice little piece of code to help me communicate that or not, it's something that folks need to be aware of. And some folks are already doing it, like you said, with just the whole via and hat tip and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I do think having kind of universal symbols, because the web is becoming a place that needs to be kind of, it needs to be crossed. It needs to be globalized,
Hmm.
right? The language needs to be available. Something like these symbols is a sort of language similar to like an RSS feed icon or even just a Facebook logo.
Yep.
That people understand across the board. They know when they're hitting the tweet button or they're hitting a Facebook like button. I mean, the like button nowadays doesn't say like. It really is, although they could localize that, it really is ubiquitous in how it's recognized.
Hmm.
And so creating something that's more visual, again, as we kind of go back to things, is maybe not necessarily a bad idea, but just like you said, having to code that in, how easy or hard is it for somebody to be able to quickly put that into the flow of the document that they're using and add it. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this gets adopted or doesn't get adopted. I mean, I heard a lot of frustrated folks or folks that didn't quite agree with the need for it, and other folks that were. So I think it'll be debated. But I remember even when RSS was starting to grow in popularity and how people were trying to decide how that was visually going to get communicated.
Right.
And even whether or not, for instance, they would start using RSS icons that were not orange, because orange is the color that we all see.
Yep.
And in fact, when you really think about it, and you want to have a website that's about your brand, and you have a very specific look and feel to the site, and you want it to kind of be on brand with its colors and everything, and then suddenly they get you, in order to say that you have an RSS feed, you got to throw this orange button on there.
Hmm.
It can kind of feel a little awkward for folks visually. These things are not nearly by any means as intrusive into the kind of visual space that you might want to create for your site. But at any rate, it'll still be interesting.
Yeah, and real quick, the feed icons I think is a great example because there actually is a site that has tried to standardize the feed icon, and the site's been around since 2007. So it's definitely part of the reason why you see that kind of orange icon where it's the circle and the little things radiating out of it, is because somebody said, hey, we need a better symbol for this, and they created it and they distributed it. And if you actually go to feedicons.com, and we'll include that link in the show notes, but on feedicons.com, it has both the orange icon, and then it has 50 different colors. And then if either of those don't work, you can actually download a developer kit, which includes all the icons in a number of different formats, including a lot of the Adobe suites. So you can get in there and customize the colors and customize the size and make it work to your own design. All of that is available for free use. You don't have to pay them for it. They've really just said, hey, we get a lot of value out of RSS, so we want to make sure people use it correctly, and that as sort of this online creator system, we all agree to use symbols that'll make it easier for our audience to understand what we're putting out there.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe the way to mass adoption is, for instance, being able to do some sort of shortcut key or something in some of the major editors, and on WordPress and Blogger and other things like HTML when coders are using it. I mean, of course, that gets a little hard again when people are quickly creating and creating content and such, and writing that content. But if it was somehow built in with a couple shortcut keys or something like that for people to plop in there, I think it would be something that people would definitely at least initially try. And the more visually that content consumers see that and understand what it means, the more likely it is that I think other folks the content creators will likely, or curators will likely use it.
Yeah, I agree. And they've got some good launch partners on board, which always helps. Some sites with decent sized audience. So as this audience starts to see these over and over again, it again reinforces, oh, I'm seeing the same symbols. I understand what those mean. Now I want other sites to use them so that I can just continue that visual indication of this link between content. I understand pretty quickly what that means.
Cool. Well, let's see. What do we have next? What do you want to move on to?
I thought real quickly, I just wanted to touch on, given the fact that we talked about iPads pretty extensively at the start of the show, I would throw one more mention in at the fact that I actually saw a surprising number of iPads in use at South by Southwest. And part of what surprised me is it wasn't just people, reading on them. People were using their iPad as their go-to computer. So I'd look around in some of these panels, and it felt like at least about a third of the folks had their iPad on their lap, and they were either pecking away at the screen, or some people had brought along external keyboards. But seeing people using the iPad as their primary device wasn't that unusual there. There were people, sadly, there were people using it as their camera. There was somebody that brought it to the concert, the closing concert, and was holding it up like a giant video camera. So, I think just looking a couple years out, I wouldn't be surprised to see that idea of using the iPad as your primary device take hold, and see more and more mainstream people start to do that. So as a marketer, just being prepared for the idea that, we've all thought of, okay, I need to be ready for this mobile web, and the idea that everybody is starting to check the internet on their phone. But now it's just keeping in mind as well that you should make sure your content and your websites and everything are really optimized for the iPad as well, or at least, a smaller tablet sized device, because as these things get, Verizon 4G, and you're going to be connected everywhere you go, I wouldn't be surprised to see just this mass adoption of the iPad as either the only device or the second device that somebody uses in addition to their phone.
Well, I mean, you've heard the what do you want to say, the metaphor that Steve Jobs used for iPads versus desktop PCs and laptops, right?
Remind me.
So that was putting you on the spot there. So he had the whole trucks and cars thing, where he essentially said that, and somebody's going to listen and they're going to go, nope, that's not what he said. But this is what I remember him saying, and I use it a lot because I like to talk to folks about the mobile, the prospects of mobile devices in the future. But he essentially said that PCs and even laptops are pretty much like trucks, whereas mobile devices are like cars. When people go out and most average folks, out of 1,000 people, a majority of the folks have cars. They don't have trucks. They use trucks for, trucks are for people that have specific uses for those trucks, hauling something, their work requires it. They work in some place where they want to off-road a little bit more and kind of have a more versatile vehicle. Whereas, again, most people, they use cars A to Z. It does what it needs to do, and so on. And so Steve Jobs said that, desktops and laptops with all the kind of beefiness that they have and all the power they have, and in fact, obviously desktops being tethered to a table, were going to be more for people that needed to use them for I want to say that utilitarian reasons. Utilitarian. That's what it is. God, so I'm starting to get all political on you. Utilitarian reasons. And whereas the mobile devices are of course kind of what the average folks would end up using. People go out, they want to get a computing device that allows them to connect to the internet, check their email, look on the web, read about what's going on, connect with their friends and family through social networks, capture some content and upload it to their profiles. That is something an iPad and an iPhone can do. And they can have it with them at all times. They can bring it with them when they go to work or school or fun or whatever. And so that's, it's true. It's true. It's happening now, and we can't only think about how things are in today's framework. As people get older, we've got teenagers, and the first thing that they end up getting, for instance, is a smartphone. Most teenagers are not necessarily just grabbing feature phones. I mean, things like Android phones are so inexpensive now that whether it be an Android phone, whether it be an iPhone, whether it even just be an iPod Touch, which is essentially like a small computer. It's the same thing as an iPhone without a cellular connection. But that kind of familiarity early on with those devices bleeds into then their understanding and their kind of familiarity with using similar mobile type devices, tablets, when they start maybe doing things like going to school and using it for textbooks, or going to college and using it again for textbooks and kind of their mobile computing device. And so with that said, Whereas right now we have a certain percentage of folks, although significant, still a minority, using these devices kind of as their primary computing device. We're talking 10 years from now, it's gonna shift in a huge way,
Hmm.
where you have to be thinking of what your mobile strategy is going to be, not just necessarily about advertising, on mobile devices, but how the content you create, whether it be your website or anything else, an app, uh, conforming or fitting or being accessible.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me, and I would even say it's going to be quicker than that. I would say 5 years out, I wouldn't be surprised to see the iPad a primary device for a large number of people, given the fact that we're just barely 3 years into the iPad's existence, and we're already seeing a significant number of people at the tech, the early adopter side of the scale using it as their primary device. I wouldn't be surprised if 5 years down the road, that's already kind of become the norm.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So Highlight, we had talked about Highlight a couple or last episode heading into South by as potentially the breakout app for South by. So I figured I'd do a little reporting on what I noticed.
What did you notice?
So unfortunately, I did not use it, or I didn't get as much value out of it as I was hoping. I think that leading up to South by, I had been playing with the app and making some introductions to folks and really getting a lot of value out of it. And then when I got to Austin, the all that kind of went away. Unfortunately, the app, it for the most part just drained the battery on my phone, and that was it. It wasn't providing the same kind of pop-up notifications saying, "Hey, this person's close by. You should meet with them." Or if I fired up the application and said, "Let's find out who's around me," it would list off, 20 people because everybody's all in the same area. And if you're in a giant conference hall and there's three different floors and everybody's both horizontally and vertically in your same area, it might say, "Hey, you're 20 feet from this person," but it also means they're 5 floors above you and a 20-minute walk through the crowd. So it wasn't as easy to just sync up with people as, if you're just walking around the city and it says, "Hey, this person's close by."
I'll tell you whose battery was running out was basically anybody that had signed up for a highlight account or a Glancy account or any of those accounts ahead of time.
Hmm.
Because essentially, as everybody led up to South by Southwest and went, through South by Southwest and came out the other end of the first week of South by Southwest, they were all signing up for the service. And so the phone was just always telling me all the friends who were signing up for the service. And I think it's funny because I had joked around about that with something else with notifications. And somebody said, well, these apps do have notifications that you can turn on and off and so on and so on. But for me, I find it kind of necessary, especially when you sign up early to something, to kind of leave those notifications there so that you can see. I use it as a way to pay attention to see, like, is this popular yet? Is this something people are using? I can tell by the type of people who are signing up if it's something that is now broken away from the early adopters and is making its way to kind of the more mainstream users or folks that I know that may just not really use social apps or anything that much. That's how I knew kind of when Facebook was starting to turn the corner, was when suddenly all these people I knew at the local chamber of commerce were starting to use it and were wanting to connect and all that. So Highlight, a battery killer, and at least over the last week, and some of the other apps were starting to get a little bit more popular as well, like Glancy that we talked about last week. But Highlight seemed to be the one that was springing up on my phone more than anything.
Yeah, I actually did the same thing. I left all the notifications on because I wanted to see the types of friends that were signing up and when they were, turning on Highlight in relation to either people talking about it or news stories coming out. So it was a battery drain. Pretty much, that was the only thing that I got out of it was a dead battery throughout South by Southwest. But that said, I don't want to dismiss Highlight. I think that even leading up to South by Southwest, I did actually get a chance to make a couple introductions to people through the application. I can see the value of it. I'm still, as I'm walking around San Francisco, I'm still getting pinged by interesting people that I'm walking by.
When I was in
And
San Francisco yesterday and I was coming back through, I don't know if you were home early or what, but I
mhm.
swear when I was passing Alameda, it told me Corey O'Brien is nearby.
Uh-oh. That might have been me. But yeah, I think, for anybody that hasn't had a chance to give it a try, especially if you're in a more popular area or a more city like area where there's going to be a lot of people around you that you might want to meet or might want to introduce yourself to, load up the app, make a couple introductions and just see if it works for you. And along those lines, one thing that I actually came across, which I thought was really interesting, was the highlight drinking game. And it sounds, when I saw it, I was like, highlight drinking game. I want to at least see what they're talking about there. And it's a lot less, party-tastic than it sounds. It sounds like this, oh, we're going to use highlight to drink a bunch of beers. And that's actually not what it is. What it is using your blurb to offer to buy somebody a drink and making that a easy way of establishing connections, being kind of openly friendly and just saying, hey, anybody that wants to message me, I'll buy you a coffee, or I'll take you out for a beer and we can chat about marketing or social media or mobile development or whatever your interests are. But I thought that was, an easy way, because I know for myself, and I feel like for a lot of people, you see this open space where you can add your own blurb, and the blurb is your description or your introduction to somebody, and you're staring at that thing and you're like, God, what do I write here? And so, some of the example blurbs they have was, one says, hi, I'm Sean, I'm into online marketing, and I'll buy you a drink if you tell me that my hair looks nice. So right there, it tells somebody what you're interested in. It tells them that you're going to buy them a drink. So there's value in there. There's something in there for them just making the introduction. And then it says, tell me my hair looks nice. That way it opens the door. They know how to introduce themselves to you. You can both get a kind of a laugh at it. But I thought
they're basically all icebreakers.
Exactly.
But they
that's right.
find a way to slip in alcohol. That's what they're doing.
Well, not necessarily. There's
Hi,
coffee,
I'm Bob. I'm into social media, and I'll buy you a drink if you come back to my room so we can make bad decisions together.
Yeah.
That one involves social media, alcohol, and some bad decisions.
And some bad decisions, exactly. You could swap in coffee or, less tea, something less drink related if you wanted to. If you wanted to keep it.
Hi, my name is Adam, and I'm into online marketing, and I'll buy you a Diet Fanta if you you tell me my hair looks nice. It doesn't work because my hair is thinning out, so that doesn't work.
Yeah,
I'll come up with some. I'll have to come up with some, my versions of these then.
All right, there you go. You owe us a follow up now.
Now the pressure's on to come up with something cool. Okay.
Yeah.
But it is a cool idea. I think it's a cool idea to help folks understand that area is for them to break the ice, or at least to kind of try to initially break the ice and invite people. I've seen a number of folks on Highlight, just a few actually, that have kind of really put something there that's like, look, I like connecting. Come talk to me. I don't bite. But those are always the people that do end up biting, or like or end up watching you from afar as you look around trying to find the person with the red rose in their pocket or something like
that. But part of the lesson that came out of South by Southwest, though, was as I was using the app and was at least trying to make some connections with it, the people that didn't have any blurb attached to their account, I pretty much just skipped over that because I had no way of knowing what our connection might be or what I might be interested in actually talking with them about. So I would say at the very least, you have to have something in there, even if you just throw in some keywords and say, social media, mobile, local, come chat. But if you have nothing in there, all the person has to go on is a picture. And unless you're, some extremely attractive person that everybody wants to talk to, that's not going to do you much good. So, throw in a blurb. And if you're having trouble thinking of one, use this highlight drinking game as some inspiration.
Very cool.
One of the other things that got a lot of coverage, but I figured we could at least talk about it on the show here, was the Jay-Z concert at South by Southwest. And this was sponsored by American Express as part of the kickoff for their American Express Syncs with Twitter program.
Were you there?
I was not. I did not get tickets. Yeah, and I probably had I been given tickets would have gone, but I didn't go out of my way to get them. I felt like if I really wanted to see Jay-Z, I could just buy a concert ticket and go to a Jay-Z concert. So I did not get a chance to go.
So was
But
this so this was something that American Express was sponsoring, kind of really almost like regular tour concert style, or was it something where they foot the bill for a chunk of tickets that you either had to go out and you had to find or win, or they were at a discount? How did they work that?
so it was entirely they paid the entire thing. It was brought to you exclusively by American Express. They, basically flew Jay-Z in for this concert for people that activated their sync account. And the way that you got a ticket,
That's what the sync was. I wasn't getting it at first. Now I understand.
the way that you got a ticket is you would sync your Twitter to your American Express card, and then they had a booth set up, and starting Saturday morning, you'd go and find one of the people at the booth, show them the synced accounts, and they'd give you a ticket. So it was a way of they were rewarding people that were early adopters into it, but really it was just a way of handing out tickets because everybody was talking about this thing. It was the talk of South by Southwest, the fact that, hey, Jay-Z's here, he's doing a concert. Everybody was trying to get in. Everybody wanted to see it and be part of the crowd that was at the concert.
That was one of those things that I had heard about through Instagram, actually. I saw on Instagram a bunch of people were starting to shoot photos and sharing it and stuff. And afterwards, you had shared the link and directly to YouTube, and I was able to take a look at the show. It was it's pretty awesome. And now a little over an hour show. Jay-Z, one of the biggest artists in the world right now, and usually not somebody that would just kind of go out and make an appearance unless obviously somebody like American Express was paying them big bucks. And they did a full production, beautiful videography and everything. Not really heavily on the branded side for the actual performance, from what I remember seeing. It wasn't like they had him running around throwing out, American Expresses into the audience and
Black cards for everyone. Who
and at the very end, he said, "Don't leave home without it," or something like that. They put on a really nice production, and then after the fact, of course, I think they're going to get a lot of people watching the performance. And again, it's very kind of subtle, the connection there, but that's also because for me, I wasn't aware that it was a promotion for their sync customers. But it goes back to something we discussed a week or more ago, where we were talking about how American Express seems to be really kind of almost branding itself as the digitally, socially literate brand for for credit cards in the financial area. They were obviously very active on Twitter, as we noted before, and had done kind of a cool Twitter campaign I think it's an ongoing thing. And then also they were active in Foursquare, and to kind of then see them do this, it sounds like they're really trying to get their create a foothold in the social media space.
Yeah, and they're doing so with just massive budgets, and it goes to show that if you want to make a splash at South by Southwest and make sure that you're the thing that everybody's talking about, one way to do that is to just throw a ton of money at it. Because when you've got somebody like Jay-Z throwing a free concert, it's hard for people not to talk about that. So they pretty much said, hey, from what I heard, it was at least $1 million that they paid Jay-Z just to come in and do the show. That doesn't.
I figured it had to be something close to that.
Yeah, that doesn't even take into account renting the space, all the promotion around it, the people to actually work the event, hand out the cards beforehand. They must have spent, millions and millions of dollars on this thing. But
hey, man, it was all from everybody using the American Express.
Exactly. They must have spent millions of their customers' dollars on this thing. But
exactly.
The end result was that everybody talked about it, everybody covered it, all the, Instagram was taken over by pictures from the concert, blogs had to write about it, everybody was there, everybody shared their own video from the concert. It was
so the lesson learned, right, is if you want to make a splash, just spend the most money
Exactly.
on
Light
making that
$100
splash.
bills on fire.
Exactly. Just say make it rain, and just throw, like you said, money out there and just spend the most money of everybody. And if you find out who is spending the most money at any given event, and spend 10% more on doing something big and extravagant, and then you'll have a huge impact. But
Well, big, I would say, is the right word. One thing that I noticed is things that were either physically big or just big in scale did well, and companies that tried to use, oh, we're gonna hide a couple of QR codes here and there and hope that people scan it, that just didn't work. And so one example of something that was metaphorically big but lower budget was Just 3, which is a creative agency that every year kind of does a big presence at South by Southwest. They had created these giant stickers. They were like a foot and a half, 2 feet wide by a foot and a half, 2 feet tall, huge stickers that just said Just 3. And they would stick them to columns and trucks and anywhere they could find. They would just stick these stickers. But it worked. You couldn't ignore it. You were walking around and you'd see this giant Just 3 all over the place, and it was really cool looking. It was colorful. It was well designed, but they literally went big with their marketing, and as a result, people paid attention. You saw these things. You noticed the word Just 3, and you said, took a mental note. Oh, I got to look up and see what they do.
well, I think even part of it, for instance, is not only about the fact that it just did this big thing, but that they took advantage of the fact that at South by Southwest, that is something you can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you arguably couldn't do that sort of thing everywhere.
Right.
You couldn't do it in maybe your average city, putting this huge stickers everywhere. You might eventually get, snagged for vandalism or something like that.
Yeah, at
But
South by, they actually wrap the trees and poles and fences in saran wrap, knowing that people are going to stick stuff to it. So beforehand, they wrap everything in saran wrap. Everybody's just free to go around and put a sticker and a poster or a flyer on anything that is saran wrapped. And then I'm assuming at the end of either the end of the day or the end of the event, they just cut the saran wrap off and everything's back to normal. I thought that was really funny.
that's pretty funny.
One last thing from South by before we move on is homeless hotspots. I'm not sure if you saw any of the blog coverage about this. This was
Oh no, there was no blog coverage.
no blog coverage. This was definitely the most controversial idea at South by Southwest, I would say, and as a result, actually got a lot of coverage. So hey, there's no bad thing as bad press, right? But I wanted to get your take on it, since you weren't actually at South by Southwest, but probably read about this in some of the blogs, and just get your take as an outside perspective. Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? What was your reaction to seeing these stories?
You know, it's one of those things where if you see it enough around the social web, you kind of click and go, okay, I think this is whether it be significant or not, it's a story that everybody seems to be talking about. Mm-hmm. So I didn't take a deep dive into the story that much, but I do know it sounds like it was done. There were some elements of it that really could have had a great message.
Yep.
But that weren't executed in that fashion, and the trust factor of it. And I'm going to let you kind of expand upon it in just a second. So I'm going to keep my response short so that we can explain about what happened. Mm-hmm. But there was an element of it that could have kind of it could have projected a higher level of trust and authenticity. And for some people, it seemed like the opportunity to send a message, like a positive message, mm-hmm. Was less about sending that positive message and more about maybe potentially exploiting a cost savings,
right,
on the part of the labor that they chose to use for this particular campaign. So I'm going to let you kind of expand real quick and describe what exactly we're talking about, what happened.
Okay, so Homeless Hotspots was I think it was an agency that did it, not a brand. It was an agency that wanted to get their name out there. And so they actually gave some of the homeless people in Austin a 4G wireless hotspot. And they wore this thing around their neck like a necklace. And then they had shirts on that said, "I'm a wireless hotspot." I think it said, like, "Ask me for the password." And so the idea was people that were outside of the convention center and needed to connect to the internet could talk to these people and say, "Hey, I need to connect." And the homeless people would give them the password to this wireless hotspot. And the idea was in that process, it starts a conversation and it gets people to kind of talk with these people versus just walking by and trying to ignore them. The Some of the issues that they ran into were how they talked about it. So a lot of people took offense with the fact that the t-shirts said, "I am a wireless hotspot," not "I'm an actual person who happens to be holding a wireless hotspot." It sort of turned human beings into the easy way to access the internet, which definitely a first world problem, I think.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by this giant tech event and there's Wi-Fi everywhere, but I just happen to not be able to connect. So let me, pay this homeless person $1 to connect to a wireless hotspot that's hanging around his neck. So I think, people took offense to it, possibly for good reason. It could have been handled a little better. But what I wanted to bring up is a theme that we've had on this show is always be experimenting. And I think this was a good example of somebody, take an experiment, doing a new idea that hasn't been done before, and they ran into some issues and faced some negative PR from that. But at the same time, they came out after the fact and did follow up interviews with people and said, "Hey, they actually said, like, we were experimenting with this, and we know that there's lessons we need to learn, and we know that there's things we need to improve, but we stand behind this idea, and we think that." It did a lot to bring positive conversation and awareness around this issue, and we're proud of the work that we've done.
And then the post that we'll have linked up from The Verge, we'll have it on our show notes on the site when we put this episode up, is that it was actually done in partnership with Front Steps. It's a Texas homeless shelter. Mm-hmm. So they actually did do it in partnership with a homeless shelter. I think the language on the shirt, like you said, was probably something that was a little questionable for folks. Mm-hmm. But I don't think this is something that was meant to. This was something that was meant to make you feel a little uneasy.
Yeah.
Even as the quote says it here in the post, it says the reality is that the homeless make us uncomfortable, and that somebody even says in here, which I think is correct. It says. Let's see, where plenty of people seem to think that it was dehumanizing. It's actually kind of the opposite. It's literally humanizing. Mm-hmm. Think about and looking at the homeless is hard. So whether that last statement necessarily, whatever way you feel about it, I think that it is in fact humanizing, and it brings attention to an issue, right? It wasn't meant to advertise a product or service, so to speak. It was meant to kind of bring awareness to a social issue that was over there, and they took advantage of the audience that was going to be there for South by Southwest. And again, the language might have kind of put a bad taste in folks' mouths, but I think when you look at it and you line all the ducks up in a row and you see who it was that participated in this and why they were doing this, then in fact it was actually pretty, dare I say, innovative.
Yeah.
In just bringing attention to those folks. So I kind of commend them in a way of like you said, experimenting. You're not always going to be able to execute things 100% correctly. There's going to be people, especially when it comes to with social issues. Taking a look at something like the Coney video. Mm-hmm. The Coney video is huge, and there's some goofy stuff going on right now with that whole story as we speak today. But people are opening their mouth and having a discussion about a topic that they may never have discussed, let alone done something about, had they not had that sort of potentially uncomfortable introduction to it.
Right.
Yeah, I think again, there's some areas that could have been improved, but I think we're going to see more of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more and more and more of it, and people are going to talk and be comfortable or uncomfortable, and that's perfectly fine, because as long as the discussion is there, that's what matters. If we're going to ignore it all the time, there goes my social, political, whatever rant. But I think this really is about marketing or an organization, right? Marketing a nonprofit or marketing a more social leaning organization, and these are the types of potential tactics that need to be used in order to make that happen.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to get out there and make a strong stand and stand by it and not apologize and say, "Hey, we're starting discussion one way or another, and there might be some things that we could have changed, but we still believe in the cause, and we still think that we're helping to better people's lives."
Yep, yep.
Nice. All right, so let's move on from South by and cover one follow-up topic real quick that I wanted to make sure that we covered, which is the clout guilt perk. This was something that we had covered on a previous show.
Is that the one when you feel guilty about using cloud? Is that what it is?
The guilty perk. No, this was the GILT.com guilt perk.
Yes.
Guilt is the social shopping site where you get deals on a variety of things. And they had actually partnered with Clout, and we had covered it because it was an interesting model. They were giving away discounts based on your influence score, with everybody at least receiving something. So, anything from 20% off to upwards of and including 100% off an item if your Clout score was high enough.
Or if you were Robert Scoble, that was about it.
Or if you're Robert Scoble, exactly. And so, we had talked about this on the show. I got really excited about it. I've used Guilt before. I like the site. I like the types of things that they sell on there. So I was like, oh, this will be great. It gives me a chance to do a little kind of fun shopping and pick something up that I might not have otherwise picked up at a good deal, and support both of these companies that are doing something innovative in the marketing space. So on the day that I was scheduled to have this guilt perk activated, I go and I log on and I try to claim for me, it was going to be a 60% discount. I log on and I try to claim it. It says, oh, they're all used up. But thanks for coming to the site. Here's 20% off. And I was like, well, they're all used up. I logged on like really early in the morning, and looking through their terms, it looked like they were going to have a fair number of these things to give away. So I was kind of surprised. I'm like, how are they already used up? So I sent a message out to both Clout and Guilt, and one of the Twitter representatives from Guilt responded back and said, yes, they all have been claimed, but we hope you appreciate the 20% off so that you can still take advantage of this opportunity. And so it got me thinking, and I dug a little deeper. And what happened is I was actually confused by how you were supposed to activate this deal. So they made it clear that, yes, there was going to be a limited number of these available. But what they didn't make clear is that it was first come, first serve based on when the program was initially announced. So the idea was when it first went live, you were supposed to claim your discount, and then you would come back on your specific day to actually use that discount. But I had no idea, and looking back through it, it was not very clear that that was the process. So I started asking around. I asked other people that had also been looking forward to this, and a lot of people were in the same boat. They said, no, I had no idea that, I was supposed to have claimed this thing when I first saw it. Why did they give me a specific day to use it? If that wasn't the specific day, I was also supposed to kind of log on and activate it. A two-part process, that seems strange. So I think the macro feedback from this is that if you're not careful, a small detail like that can actually ruin the experience of somebody that's trying to interact with your campaign. It's not like I'm going to boycott Guilt and never shop there again, but it definitely left a bad taste in my mouth when I said, for not preparing, I basically, lack of preparedness on their behalf of making sure that all their copy was written properly and that it was easy to understand. I, as a user, didn't get to take advantage of the discount. I didn't get to shop at Guild, have that positive experience. Instead, it was turned into a very negative experience of not getting what I was expecting. So I think, be careful with the small details, because a huge program, I'd imagine they spent quite a bit of money on both the discounts and actually promoting this program. It was a larger scale program that was essentially, kind of broke down from a very small detail of making sure it was clear when you request the percentage off and when you then go and actually use that percentage off.
Yeah, I had no idea as well. I mean, I was pretty excited. I was joking around with you on Twitter about the fact that I'm like right on the border between two discounts, and that I was trying to bump up my clout score just to one point in order to get the higher bracket of a discount. And I went the day before because I said, hey, well, if my score doesn't make it, I need to see if I claim it.
Right.
It was all gone. And then they go ahead and offer you the 20%. And then the same thing for the next day, just in case it got bumped up. It is not, I mean, I'm looking at it again right now, and it says, let's see, there are a limited number of discounts available each day.
Yeah.
That each day means you come back more than one day, and they divvy out a bunch of discounts. It should say there's a limited number available for each bracket or each level of clout score or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one time to claim your prize based on what you were saying. That you go and you claim it, but you come back that day in order to actually get the access to the coupon code or whatever it is that they were going to give out.
Yep.
I mean, the end result isn't about just having a cruddy experience. It ends up being that, you have a percentage of people that when they are rating this guilt perk or this clout perk, when you come here, there's a review about what people's experience was. And you see a few people here and there were like, awesome, I'm happy I got 50% off. And then you got a bunch of people on here saying, what's going on, guys? I don't get this.
Right.
I mean, two of them in a row here saying supposed to be 60%, but not sure why I only got 20% today. Disappointing. I was promised 60%. Mm-hmm. My clout score is 90. The discount was supposed to be 100%. Now, for some reason, 20%. Bait and switch.
And when you're pissing somebody off that's a 90 clout score, that person's influential. I mean, that's the reason that you're trying to bring in somebody with a 90 clout score to experience this discount that you're doing. So you're really setting yourself up to piss off some highly influential people, which I think is probably the worst situation. Had they accidentally, given everybody a higher percentage than they were due, everybody would have been like, oh, this is great. But I think messing up the experience for not only, the lower cloud score, but also the top tier cloud score people really shows the danger of not working through all those details.
And I was a little disappointed kind of in there's kind of that feeling when you come and they say, hey, you know what, you can't get the discount that you were hoping for, but we're going to give everybody 20% off. So here, go ahead and take 20% off. I mean, yeah, it's cool you get 20% off, but at the same time, it kind of feels like what they're saying is, we knew that you were going to come here and not be able to get your discount.
Right.
We want to give you a discount so that you'll go anyways to Guild and you'll spend money. And if you were not a Guild user, then you'll be invited, you'll have access, and you'll be a first time buyer. So that hopefully those folks will obviously convert into to continual customers and so on. But it's just something a little uneasy about that, and I don't look forward to perks being done in that fashion myself.
Right.
Where they make it sound, because when they say perks, they make it sound exclusive or something, right? And instead of being exclusive, it's definitely not exclusive. What's exclusive is potentially when they have those much higher level perks, but still they're kind of using it as a way to increase awareness, as we talked about the conference, for instance, that was being marketed before on Clout, where everybody got a discount. It didn't matter. You just simply had to be signed up for Clout, and that was it.
Right.
So that I'm not going to go as far as to say a bait and switch, but that's how it seems folks are interpreting it on their own based on the reviews that are here.
Yeah. And, I guess if I had to boil it down, the two things I would say is, one, when all else fails, be blatantly honest and blatantly clear and make sure that you've spelled it out and that there's no room for confusion. And two is that if you're going to use something like Cloud and your goal is to interact with highly influential people online, if anything goes wrong, give them the benefit of the doubt and keep that experience positive, because the moment that your program isn't giving somebody with a 90 clout score or a really high clout score a good experience, there's a lot of risk there for your brand with that person turning around and saying, tweeting out to their audience, oh, I just got a bait and switch from Guilt and I'm not going to shop there ever again. That could be very damaging and very detrimental.
Amen.
All right. Well, that's quite a show for late on a Friday. What do you say we call it? Or is there anything else you wanted to cover today?
Only any of the new apps that I want to put on my iPad when I get off the line here.
There you go. All right. Well, as always, we want to thank the audience. We appreciate everybody that listens to this, both live and the recorded version, if you get a chance to download that. So we appreciate everybody that's listening to the Solo Mo show and hope that you've liked the episodes that we've done so far and look forward to the episodes we've got planned for the future. If you'd like to get in touch with us, there's a number of ways to do that. One of the quickest would be Twitter. We actually have an account for the show that's at Solo Mo Show, and that is checked by both Adam and I. Or if you want to reach us directly, I'm available at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi.
And we've also recently set up a page on Facebook. So if you're a Facebook user, and I'd imagine 99.9% of you are, go ahead and just search for Solo Mo Show, and that should pop right up. And you can like us on Facebook. We'll make sure to post all the new episodes there. And you can, give us feedback through that page. You can comment. We'll be checking that. We're also on Google Plus. So again, just go to Google Plus if you're a Google Plus user, search for Solo Mo Show, and you'll see us there. Or if you want to get in touch via email, send it to solomoshow@gmail.com. And that'll, again, reach both Adam and I, and you can send us questions, comments, feedback, or just reach out and say hi. We'd love to meet you the old school way, not the highlight way. We'll do email introductions and maybe buy you a drink if you're in town. And just a reminder, all the links that we discussed today, as well as links to the social channels that we just mentioned, can be found in the show notes, which you can view either at solomoshow.com or on your podcast player of choice. They should be available there somewhere. You might have to dig around in the settings, but we promise they're there. So, encourage you to reach out and get in touch, or at the very least say hi. We'd love to get in touch. And one small request, if you have a spare moment, go head on over to iTunes and rate the show.
It's not a small request, man. That's life or death.
Life or death, exactly. We will find negative reviews and hunt you down. No. But, if you could just go ahead and find the show on iTunes, give it a rating, be honest, we're not asking for any type of review. Let people know what you actually think about the show. We hope that that's positive. We hope you actually enjoy the show. And
if you don't, then we leave it to you to actually let us know how we can improve it. That's the important part.
There you go. If you're going to leave a negative review, leave it with some constructive feedback so we can make the show better. But we would appreciate that. That's a great way for us to help build the audience, get the show out there, get the show heard by more people, and which is better for all. It gives us more motivation to keep doing this and make sure that we're putting the best content out there for everybody. And with that, I think that's an episode.
It is a wrap.
All right, let's go enjoy our iPads. Thanks.
All right, man. Take care.
Thanks, Anna.